the metal, baby. Holy shit, the brakes are bad. After World War II, the European auto industry was on its knees. Resources were really hard to find. I mean, it was hard to find steel, gasoline was expensive, and the car makers, they were poor, and so were the people. I mean, Europe was really hit hard after the war. So automakers had to come up with some solutions. They had to come up with a way of building cheap, reliable, sturdy vehicles for the masses. They had to basically jumpstart their country's economy. The Germans had the Volkswagen Beetle, the British had the Mini Cooper, the French had the Citroën 2CV, and the Italians had the oh so charming and unbelievably adorable Fiat 500. It's hard not to smile when looking at the original Fiat 500, especially next to somebody like me. You're probably wondering if I fit inside this car. Well, the answer is yes. It's actually quite surprising how much space there is in an old Fiat 500. This thing is absolutely adorable, and what you're not seeing is that behind the camera, there's a lineup of people that are smiling as much as I am looking at this car. We've been getting so much positive attention with this vehicle all day, and it's quite ironic because the Fiat 500 did not come in a very positive time during Italy's history. However, it brought a lot of happiness and a lot of freedom to the Italian people. So come with me, we're going to go for a drive, and we're going to discover all the fine details of the 1967 Fiat 500. Now it's time to see if I fit inside the old Fiat 500, and honestly, I'm a bit worried, but let's give this a try. So, open up the very tiny and flimsy door, and it's very flimsy, honestly. Honestly, it just looks like a sheet of paper. And here I go. It's not so bad. It's actually not that bad. And apparently the owner tells me that even if this door is very flimsy, I need to give it a good tug if I want it to close properly. So, all right, here you go. It felt flimsy, but it's nice and solid. So sitting inside the Fiat 500, you quickly realize that there's nothing in this cabin. You're probably hearing an echo right now, actually, because it's so empty. But honestly, I kind of like this emptiness. It really gives it a nice spacious feel. It feels like a lounge. And that kind of was the purpose of the original design of this vehicle. Now, I've got these tiny little bucket seats. I don't have anything for a headrest. So if I get hit in the back, well, my neck is pretty much broken. I have no seat belts, and this is quite scary considering the thickness of the doors. And I have this neat, large steering wheel right here. Again, very slim, very flimsy looking, but it's got a nice classic Italian styling to it with the big Fiat logo in the front. This one has really nice contrasting interior, black and white. This was repainted. The original car was not black, it was blue, but it was beautifully done. And I don't have much in terms of switch gear. I basically have one gauge because it would have probably cost too much for Fiat to have two gauges. Remember, this car was created to cost the least amount of money possible in order for Fiat to make as much money as possible and also to sell it very, very cheap. This was built to be a people's car. It was built to allow the Italian people, the Italian common folk, to get up, get out of the house and go work. So you just have what you need in a Fiat 500. So I have my big speedometer, and inside I have this tiny little tachometer. What's also interesting about the tachometer is that I don't really have an RPM speed. I don't even have any numbers. All I have are 3 red circles with numbers in it in Roman numerals, 1, 2, and 3. And those are the shift points. What that means is that by the time you arrive to the first one, you have to get rid of first gear and put it in second. By the time you're in the second, you have to be in third. And by the time you're at the third one up there, you have to be in fourth. This thing only has a 4-speed manual transmission, doesn't have a lot of power. So you got to be very laid back when you're driving a Fiat 500. You don't want to be in a hurry because, well, you're not going to go very fast, even if you try to floor the throttle. I got my trusty little ashtray right here because Italy, and also back in the day, everybody smoked. It's tiny, it's so cute, look at that. And under here, I got toggle switches for, standard stuff, wipers, headlights, blinker stock here on the left. I have my trusty little horn. That is a Fiat 500 horn. And I don't have much in terms of storage compartments. I have a massive compartment here in the front, however, because there's no glove box. This is pretty deep, so I can throw, a few things down here. A smaller one right here, no cup holders, of course, because back then cup holders didn't really exist in European cars. I've got some pockets on the side as well, and they're actually quite deep. I can put some stuff inside the doors, and that's pretty much it. There's not much else going on in a Fiat 500. Oh yeah, I do have a sunroof. It's manually operated. I'm just gonna pull on this right here, and then you just fold it up. And it's a pretty big opening. We're ready to hit the road, so I'm gonna start this bad boy. Now to start it, there's a bit of a procedure going on here. I have these two metallic levers underneath here. I first need to turn on the ignition, and then there's a choke here. I'm gonna adjust the choke a bit and then try to start it. Here we go. We're good to go. Oh my God. Well, here we go. Here we go. First gear, second already. I'm in a 30 zone right now, and that's appropriate for this car because I don't really want to go any faster than 30 kilometers an hour. Third gear, and here we go. And then you're just trotting around in third gear. I'm going about 20 kilometers an hour, and things are rather chill. I don't really want to be stressed in a Fiat 500. You don't want to, because compared to all the other cars on the road, everything is scary, honestly. Everything is super scary. When you see an SUV, you see a modern car, you're sure that they're not going to see you and they're going to run into you. So what you're hearing in the back is a 500cc engine. It's actually a 498cc engine. It's a two-cylinder engine. This is the facelift version. This is a 1967 Fiat 500F. This one had the larger displacement. Originally, these cars had a 478cc engine. It's not a lot. It's made it to a 4-speed manual transmission, but it's enough to get the car going because I have a total of 17 horsepower. 17. Now, another feature about this transmission is that it has no synchros. So, I really have to know when to shift. I have to feel it. Smooth in second gear, and then I'm back in the low end of the RPM range. But it has quite a lot of torque. It's quite surprising. It feels mostly like I'm driving a lawnmower engine, but it's enough to get this car up and going. So like the Volkswagen Beetle, the Fiat 500 had a rear-mounted motor. It's sitting right over the rear axle, and you're always hearing it behind your head. It really sounds, it's very rough. It doesn't have anything in terms of refinement. So downshifting requires a bit of an effort because you don't have any synchros in the transmission. You really have to take your time. Sometimes you have to double clutch, give it a bit of gas. You're really feeling the drivetrain. There you go, that was smoother. What a cool little car. But I'm really impressed by the refinement of this little car. I was expecting something flimsy, something raw, something not particularly comfortable nor easy to drive. Now I am finding this shifter a bit annoying because it's jamming up my thigh. Because I'm a tall person, my leg is taking up the entire transmission movement space. Whoa, I just hit a bump. And the suspension is surprisingly compliant. I mean, considering how old this car is, yes, the dampers were changed, but it really feels very light because there's nothing happening. I'm just basically sitting inside a cardboard box with a tiny lawnmower engine behind my head, and the brakes, drum brakes, are shit. This thing has one of the worst brakes I've ever felt, but it's such a slow car that I'm not really afraid of crashing with this thing. I got a lineup of cars behind me, but hey, you know what? I'm allowed because I'm driving 30 kilometers an hour in my underpowered Fiat 500. You guys have to follow me. You can't try to overtake me right now. Oh, this is amazing. Turning radius is, wow, this is great. You can tell that the Fiat 500 was created to be an urban car in the first place because it's actually quite really enjoyable to drive around a cramped area. Right now I'm in Montreal, and as if you know about the city of Montreal, you know that it's a very crowded city. There's a lot of traffic, a lot of congestion, a lot of road work, and the Fiat 500 here, it feels right at home. Here we go, second gear. Let's see, I'm gonna floor it. Pedal to the metal, baby. Third gear. I'm all out, baby. Flat out. Okay, the brakes are bad. The brakes are bad. Holy shit, the brakes are bad. Maybe flooring it was not a good idea. You know, I just picture a young Italian family in the late 50s, early 60s, driving around town in this thing with their kids in the back. I mean, you tend to understand why the Fiat 500 became so loved by the Italian people. It was allowing the Italian people to be free. It gave them freedom. It gave them mobility. It gave them the chance to buy an automobile. This thing was super affordable. It was cheap to run. It didn't cost a lot in gas. As a matter of fact, the owner tells me that he's measured the fuel consumption on this Fiat 500, and he's saying he's averaging about 5.5 liters per 100 kilometers. Now, by today's standards, you can pretty much get that from a hybrid car. But again, back in the 1950s and 60s, 5 liters per 100 kilometers was unheard of. This is one of the reasons why this car was created. And it's absolutely brilliant. There's just a nice Italian feel to it. The way it drives, the way it smells, the way it just gets up and going. And you can feel, above all, it feels like it was well engineered. That even though this car was all about cost cutting, they still built it in the best way possible. It looked absolutely beautiful. It drove well. It had enough power. It was fuel efficient. It was affordable. And that's what makes it one hell of an icon today. The positive reactions that I'm getting with this car. This thing gets so much attention. Everybody's looking at it. I guess nobody's expecting something so tiny to be coming up in their rearview mirror. I mean, people are just so happy to see this car. You know, as you know, I've had the chance of driving a lot of different cars in this profession. I've driven older cars, newer cars. I've driven Hellcats. I've driven expensive BMWs, Bentleys, whatnot. But very little vehicles have brought so much smile to my face than this Fiat 500, and I was not expecting this thing to be so fun. Of course, I had known about the Fiat 500, I had read about it, I had, you know, when they brought it back in 2007 in Europe and 2011 in North America, you know, there was a lot of hype around it, a bit like the Mini Cooper. There was a big fan base. A lot of people loved the Fiat 500 for what it represented. It had impacted a lot of people. As a matter of fact, Fiat built a bit more than 3 million examples of this car. That's how many people, how many lives the Fiat 500 affected during its lifespan. But honestly, strapping myself behind the wheel with no seatbelt in these tiny little bucket seats is a lot more exciting than I could have ever imagined. How can a tiny little car with a 2-cylinder, 2-stroke engine bring so much joy to my heart? What a brilliant machine. What a brilliant, brilliant machine. Even the horn is hilarious in this thing. Honestly, before driving the old Fiat 500, I was expecting this thing to be a bit rough around the edges and not particularly comfortable, but it's not the case. You sit in there, yes, you are kind of tight if there's somebody sitting next to you, but there's actually quite a lot of room, a lot of headroom, a lot of leg room, and the driving dynamics are fine by today's standards. I mean, it's not sporty, it's not powerful, but that's not the point. Trotting around town in a Fiat 500 is absolutely amazing. It's just a brilliant little car. It puts a smile to my face. It puts a smile to other people's faces. And you know what? Now that the new Fiat 500 is off of the market here in North America, we're not exactly remembering that model. But this one, we're going to remember it for quite a long time.